All right, key components of the project plan. There we go. Thank you. You're going to need an executive summary. You're going to need a program or project description. That's going to entail where are the interconnection points in the region. Scott mentioned some of the points of presence for broadband networks. There are smaller ones that are not in New Orleans that are scattered throughout the state of Louisiana. And you'll have to be able to connect to one of those. And how you connect to one of those depends on a variety of factors. One of the big ones is how close is it to your network? But we can talk about those things in more detail. Also in the project description, you want to talk about, are there any leased or contracted network assets that you want to have access to? So that instead of building parts of your network, you lease existing parts of someone else's network. That's going to bring down your capital costs significantly. Again, your organizational structure is going to have to be a part of your key plan. And your market analysis. In other words, you need to know what is the market for broadband in the parish? Who's got it? Who doesn't have it? What's needed? And that's going to involve demand forecasts and estimated take rates. Remember, one of the key drivers of a network's performance is penetration rate. And that is how many people take it out of how many possible. And the higher that percentage, the better off your network is, and the better off it is for your economic development package, hence the importance of adoption and digital literacy training. And finally, we need marketing and sales. And that's going to be, how are you going to market it? What's the culture of your marketing organization? Next slide, please. Okay, so you can prepare a community broadband plan, and what you want to do is showcase the planning efforts, right? And that means you have to be really excited about it, right? And that's part of what the Champions plan is doing. The champion is excited about this. The task force is excited about it. And you want to get the community excited about it. Because if the community isn't excited about it, it's going to be difficult to pull it off. So what you want to do is help with the project community plan, helps the community gain support, get key information about the projects that they know that the project plan is investment ready. In other words, you've completed the planning process, your stakeholders are excited, you've got some business models, you've made a lot of contacts through the planning process, and you're thinking, my project is ready for investment. And I've already talked to some of the banks, I've talked to grant institutions, and I think it's time to move forward with our applications and begin the implementation stages. Secondly, we want your project plan to have part of it be an implementation plan. That is, how in fact are you going to implement the network? Remember, networks take time to build. They're not going to be built everywhere at the same time. So part of the planning effort is, number one, to manage the expectations of people in the market so that they don't think that tomorrow they get good broadband. It's going to take some time, and not everybody's going to get it at the same time. So that's managing the expectations, which is vital. The other thing I think is vital is the first neighborhood that gets rolled out has to go really well. Bad word of mouth, very nasty to get over from. Okay, so the work you've done up to this point is going to feed into all three of these planning components. Next slide, please. Implementation plans, there we go, option one. This is the easiest option to work with. It would be great if it worked. Encourage your current provider to extend, build a network, and or provide service where they're not providing it now. Now, that's really useful because then you're not committing upfront capital costs, but you may. Some communities do help subsidize the expansion of private broadband networks. that's a difficult, that needs to have a lot of conversation. A lot of people are not in support of that, other communities are. Run the network on another provider's network. You're leasing space on an existing network. I don't think that's going to happen in parts of the parish as I understand it. The most complicated, of course, is option 3. And that's building or extending a network that the community has some sort of ownership in. That is complicated. That has risks to it that the other ones do not have. That is 1 and 2. But communities do that throughout the country. And we want to talk about which communities likely to do that. What are the characteristics of communities that do that? And we're going to talk about those in some of the future sessions. Next slide, please. Okay, well, Scott talked about this very well. I'm just going to add to it. As we know, telemedicine is vital. I'm working on a couple of telemedicine projects in California. And we're going to work with migrant camps there and some multiple dwelling units that are subsidized housing. Smart communities. So smart communities, that's sensors, that's controlled traffic lights, controlled street lights. That is a lot of sensors picking up information on what's happening on a particular street, in a particular neighborhood. And then there's smart agriculture. We've got a number of good task forces in our organization working on smart ag. What's nice about the smart ag is it's keeping track of every drop of water, every seed, all the fertilizer, so everything is efficient and on time. It's not enough for a farmer to gather data, put it on a thumb drive, and send it to the regional agronomist. That doesn't really work too well anymore. It's got to be real time. And also smart grid, of course. So all of these different kinds of generalized uses are going to be having different benefits to different groups, whether they're residential, businesses, or institutions. Even if you just want to connect institutions and the needs of the local government, make sure we're also looking at what the hospitals want, what your community centers will want. A lot of times community centers, Grange halls are great locations to establish computer centers for folks that don't have computers. They're also great for teaching folks who are not quite up to speed on how to use the internet and computers. And you can just schedule classes in some of those buildings once a week, twice a month, whatever your community supports. Next slide, please. All right, Scott, would you like to do this, or I can just continue?
You can continue, Don. You're on a roll.
All right, thank you. All right, so financial plans. I put together a lot of feasibility studies in my life. So I don't think it's ever too early to start your financial plans. Basic documents you're going to need are income statements, cash flows, balance sheets, and an outcome analysis. Let's talk a little bit about each one of those. Income statements. So you're going to have a variety of streams of income coming into your network. Some of those you're going to have pretty good guesses at what they're going to be. Others are going to be more guesses, right? But there's lots of examples so that you can get a pretty good feel for it. And if you've done good assessments of the community, you'll have a reasonable idea of what the wholesale numbers are going to be, what your resale numbers are going to be. We also want to make certain we have a good feel for network operations. Are we doing that ourselves on the network, or are we farming that out? So a lot of networks that are municipally owned or nonprofit owned, they farm out maintenance, they subcontract. They subcontract repairs because it's cheaper than hiring the people that would do that. And you're hiring people who already know how to do it. Statements of cash flows. So, right, when you're putting together your business plan, You need to know all of your payments from your customers, what your liability is, what your tranche payments are on debt and repayment, what your depreciation cost is on equipment. So when we work with groups on their business plans, we look at all of these categories and, we pose questions. Where did you get those depreciation figures from? I think your debt structure is a little too ambitious for paying off the debt, things such as that. Also, we want an equipment inventory, your cash flow, status of accounts, and varieties of debt. Now, when all is said and done, what's going to drive the business plan are your assumptions. And the main assumptions are, what is your construction cost? I don't know of too many construction costs in infrastructure world that come in on the button. I know a number that have come in a bit higher and some that have come in a lot higher. So when we're talking about your construction costs, we know we're going to be basing that on what construction companies have responded to you on your RFP and RFI, but we're probably also going to want to add some to that because things come up that you don't anticipate. That's kind of the nature of construction, no matter what you're doing. But in network construction that runs for many miles, count on things coming up you didn't know about. Several years ago, I was working on a project in Mississippi and turned on my computer in the morning, and the project manager sends me an email of a beautiful lake. Email them back, what is this? And he goes, this used to be my right of way. And I go, oh, that's not good. Things come up, accidents happen, and weather occurs. So we want to, at the end, we want your business plan to go through a nice sensitivity analysis. We're going to vary all the major variables that drive that pro forma. And we're going to look at worst case, best case, and those in between. And while it might be wonderful to count on the best case, it's probably not a good way to approach businesses. And that means it's probably not a good way to approach grant authorities. It's not a good way to approach a private partner, and it's not a good way to approach a local bank. Next slide, please. All right. So we're going to have another workshop. I believe it's now going to be session 5. And we're going to go into great detail on what I was just talking about, and also a deep dive into each one of these revenue or cost savings and expenses. We're going to provide you with some real life examples in communities that are similar to you, and also some examples of communities that are not, so that you get a wide variety of information about what will work in different communities, and be thinking about what's going to be working in your community. Scott and I, we love getting to know the parish. I've worked quite a bit in Alabama and Mississippi, worked for New Orleans for a while, Baton Rouge as a consultant. I'm never going to know your parish as good as you do. I'm never going to know that. That's where you guys come in as stakeholders, as the task force and champions, to understand what your community's vision is, what your resources are, what your risks are. And those are things that your community will determine.
I'm just going to do a preview of, as Don said, as a companion to this. We'll get into much more detailed about building a business plan. Again, key aspects that we're going to go over, what is available in the marketplace, understanding your data, understanding the demand in East Carroll Parish or the region, users and customer needs. We talked about some of that and how a network can meet those needs. And then we'll go over the critical components of the business plan as you put that together as a companion to your strategic plan. Again, network highlights, financial information, your implementation strategy, and your role of partners. Now, the goal of this is to build capacity so that when either you do it on your own as East Carroll Parish or in partnership with a service provider, either existing or one that plans to invest in the community, when you apply for the resources that you'll hear about from either the state, from our federal partners, USDA or EDA, this is the type of information that they're looking for to be able to justify and make an award. So next slide, please. And then just really quickly, we'll go over these 5 steps. You can take a picture of this, but we'll go over these in much more detail. But again, these are all, we're reiterating the same, mantra, right? We want to make sound decisions based on your community roadmap and the partnership assessment. So that's all the work that you're going to do now with your broadband champions and your stakeholders. Don mentioned about performing market research, right? Determining the appropriate level of the service offering based on your demand in your area, considering the operational requirements, either of a service provider existing or one that you want to invest in to come into the community, entice to come into the community, and then how to document those financial projections. So that's just an overview of session number 5, which is a TBD. I know when we initially rolled this out, it was going to be 4, but we thought we would add another session just to talk about the business plan aspect of it and the financial requirements.
Scott,
all right, so with that, yes.
There's a question of we're not expected to have all this done by the end of the sessions, correct? I mean, yeah, this is ongoing.
You'd be one of the smartest people on the face of the earth. No, right. This is a process,
okay.
Ongoing process, again, to help you get started, and then to document all the steps or milestones, if you will, that you will need along the way. Okay. And we'll help you when this is not the last time you're going to hear from us. Even after the sessions, we're available. We're looking at, a multi-length effort to get all of this together and rolled out and implemented. Okay. So that's a very good question. So in our last couple minutes here, I just want to review exercise number 3. And this is based on the asset inventory identification that Don went through. So I'm going to ask you to review. We have these as separate standalones that we'll provide to you. Slides 31 through 36. So your homework assignment, if you will, is to go through the community and identify your community assets based on the information contained in those slides 31 through 36. And then use this as an opportunity to evaluate your community. What can you add? What's available that can help defray the cost of a broadband construction project, or that would entice maybe existing service providers to expand their infrastructure and services to East Carroll Parish. So it's going to require you to be socially distant, right? Get out in the community. Some of this information you may already know. Some of this information you may actually have to coordinate with some of your stakeholders. So this would be a great icebreaker, if you will, to talk to some of your stakeholders, state and local government agencies, and talk about some of the assets that are in the area. So again, use these, and we're going to send these out by PDF separately, just as a separate attachment, and then we'll review these as we go through our next session. So if we can go to the next slide, and in 30 seconds, I'll end it. We're going to preview, we're going to review the—
Scott, before you go forward, I just want to highlight that the asset inventory, it sounds really pretty ominous when you say it like that, but the simplest way to think about it is it's looking up, it's looking down, and it's looking around. So the looking up part is you're looking for vertical assets. Those are towers, those are light poles, those are water towers, those are things that you could hang things up. Looking down, that means those are harder to find because those are things that are in the ground. You have to talk to people about that. And looking around, those are that means really talking to people in your community. So that's really, that's what it is. That's what the asset inventory is. It's looking for those assets that could be part of the network. So it kind of sounds fancy, sounds kind of tricky when you talk about it, but when you look at those pages, that's what it's about. It's a mix of that stakeholder engagement exercise you've already done, and it's looking up, looking down, and looking around.
Thank you, Karen. So we're going to preview session number 2. We'll talk about the federal resources and local support for broadband in East Carroll Parish. It'll be presented as a panel presentation and detailed discussion. So we'll have representatives from the Delta Regional Authority and the Delta Planning Commission District talk about broadband strategies for rural Louisiana and the state and the region. You'll also hear from our federal partners about federal resources and funding programs that are applicable to East Carroll Parish. You'll hear from Bill Volk from the USDA and our friends from the EDA out of the Austin, Texas office. We're working to find possibly a local broadband service provider, 1 or 2, a representative from Electric Co-op, some philanthropic representatives, and a local bank and funder. So if you can come to that one, that'll be an informative session about resources and local support specifically for broadband for East Carroll Parish. We'll start by reviewing the asset inventory exercise again, and we'll just go over that through the chat room and look forward to that information that you find out in walking through and asking about what's available in your community. And then the goal for exercise number 4, based on information to date, what's your elevator pitch? And that's going to be the assigned exercise after we go through session number 2. So start thinking about the elevator pitch. If you had a very short 30-second window to pitch a broadband service provider to expand or provide service in East Carroll Parish, what are some of the highlight points that you want to make in pitching East Carroll Parish to that provider? So again, that's what we have aligned. If you can go to the final slide of the day.
I want to do another pitch for asset inventory, which is the other nice thing about doing it this way is if everybody finds a few assets and we review them together and next time we get together, we're going to have together a larger set of assets just by sharing them.
Correct. Again, encourage all communities to contact us. We are working directly with Delta Interfaith. So again, you don't have to figure out that you know everything or figure out that you don't know anything. That's not the point. The point is that we are working together. We are available to help you, to help Delta Interfaith as you move forward. So with that said, Laura, I will turn it back to you, and I want to thank everyone for their time and attention this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott and Don and Karen. That's awesome. We'll also put all of this stuff on the Delta Interfaith website, www.deltainterfaith.org. Thank you all for being here and hanging in. It's been awesome.